My name is Sabrina Holt, and the night my own family locked me out in the pouring rain like I was nothing more than a stray dog, that's the night I stopped being their daughter. 5 years later, they showed up at my front door with smug little smiles and empty pockets. My brother, Grant, looked around my home and said, "No husband, no kids. This is too much space for one person." Then my mother smiled and said, "We're moving in. This house should belong to us." I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just said 5 words. "I'll make one phone call." They had no idea what was coming, but let me take you back. Back to the town of Peoria, Illinois, where I grew up as the invisible child. My father, Richard, was a senior VP at a local bank. My mother, Darlene, taught high school economics. And then there was Grant, their golden boy. He got everything. A brand new Jeep on his 16th birthday. Fully funded Ivy League tuition. They even paid for his gap year in Europe. I was the afterthought. The burden. The one they forgot at school once. Twice, actually. While Grant posted selfies from Santorini, I worked double shifts at a diner just to afford a used laptop for school. Only one person ever saw me. My Aunt Marla. She lived alone in nearby Galesburg, ran a quirky little vintage shop, and called me her Phoenix girl. She always said, "You rise quiet, but you rise high." At 18, I told my parents I wanted to study UX design and coding. My father laughed in my face. "That's not a career, that's a hobby. You want to be a glorified blogger." My mother didn't even look up from her glass of wine. "Do whatever you want, Sabrina, but don't expect us to pay for it." I didn't. I worked full-time, lived on noodles and ambition, finished school with no help, no holidays, no handouts. By 25, I had a solid job at a tech startup in Des Moines. I shared a studio with my friend Aaron and lived modestly. I was building something. Then the startup folded overnight. Gone, no severance, no savings. Aaron got engaged and moved out. I applied to over 200 jobs. Nothing. I was down to $63 in my bank account. That's when I made the worst call of my life. I called home. "Dad, I just need help for 1 month. $2,000. I'll pay it back." Silence. Then Richard said, "Maybe now you understand why we told you not to waste your life chasing pretty websites." And Darlene, she chimed in with, "Grant is in the middle of launching his real estate firm. We can't afford your mistakes." Then they hung up. It was raining when I packed what little I owned into my rusted Honda Civic and drove through the night to their house. I stood on their porch, drenched, shivering, hoping the sight of me would soften something in them. Richard opened the door. No emotion. "Go to a shelter," he said. "This isn't your problem, dump." Then he shut the door in my face. I slept in a Walmart parking lot for 6 nights. Took showers at a truck stop, ate dollar menu burgers, then something changed. At a coffee shop, someone tapped my shoulder. It was Margot Lindley, a girl I barely knew from high school. I must have looked like a ghost because she sat down and asked, "Sabrina, what happened to you?" I broke down. Everything came out. Margot didn't hesitate. She took me home, gave me a bed, a shower, food. The next morning, she made a single phone call to her cousin, Nico, who ran a branding firm in Chicago. Nico looked through my portfolio and said, "You've got raw skill, you start Monday." That job saved my life. And I didn't stop there. I freelanced on the side. I built a client list. I learned how to turn code into cash. A year later, Aunt Marla passed away suddenly. I hadn't seen her in a year, but she'd never stopped believing in me. She left me her cottage, her shop, and over $60,000 in savings. I broke down when I read the note she left. "To my Phoenix girl, they tried to bury you, but you were a seed, not a corpse." I left Chicago, moved into her house in Galena, Illinois. Quiet, charming, and mine. I rebuilt her shop, turned it into a digital design agency. Called it Phoenix & Co. Within 3 years, I had 4 employees, national clients, and an actual office downtown. People started noticing. Even Grant. Speech balloon quick question. If your family kicked you out and years later tried to take back what they abandoned, what would you do? Drop your city in the comments. I want to know how different folks would react. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more real stories like this one. One day, I got a message from Grant. "Hey sis, heard you're killing it. Proud of you, we should catch up." Then Richard texted too. "Let's not let the past define us. Family should stick together." I should have blocked them, but something told me to let them come. They arrived that Saturday, all smiles. Faux sincerity dripping from every word. They admired the shop. Then at lunch it came out. "You know," Grant said, sipping wine I paid for, "this is too much house for one person. You need family around." My mother nodded. "We've fallen on hard times, and with your success it's only fair you share." Richard chimed in. "Grant's business needs an office. Your shop's back room is perfect." I sat there stunned. But they weren't finished. "We'd move in today," my mother said. "It's what Marla would have wanted." "No, not today, not ever." They stormed out when I refused. But 3 days later I was instant. Louis for a conference with Nico, and I got an alert on my security app. Live footage, Richard picking the back door lock, Darlene carrying in boxes, Grant setting up a desk. They had broken in. They were taking over my life again. I didn't panic. I made one call to my lawyer, to the police, to the county clerk. And then, I pulled something they never saw coming. I arrived home just after midnight. The driveway was full. Grant's Mercedes, Richard's old Cadillac, and a U-Haul parked like they had all the time in the world. The porch light was on. My front door wide open. Inside, it was like a reverse robbery. They hadn't stolen my stuff, they'd replaced it. My grandmother's antique chairs? Gone. Darlene had brought in her beige floral couch, the one she swore she'd never let touch second-hand floors. Grant had already installed a standing desk in my home office and was blasting music like it was his dorm again. I didn't say a word. I just stood in the doorway, staring at the people who had once left me to sleep in my car. Darlene looked up from unpacking her makeup in my bathroom. "You're early," she said. I held up my phone. "You broke in." Grant leaned against the doorframe. "We entered, it's family property." I started recording with my phone. Richard appeared, sipping scotch from one of my monogrammed glasses. "Call whoever you want. We already filed a claim. Said the house was willed to us and you're squatting." My stomach dropped. They'd filed a false ownership claim. If that worked, I could be tangled in court for months, even evicted while the case dragged. But they forgot one thing. Aunt Marla had been meticulous. I'd already registered the property in my LLC. I had security footage of the break-in, and most importantly, I had a backup plan. 2 days earlier, before leaving for the conference, I'd filed a notice of hostile claim protection with the local recorder's office. It was a little-known clause used in property disputes to flag potential unlawful entries. Thanks to that, the sheriff's department flagged their false claim and had already opened an investigation. When I dialed 911, I didn't beg. I stated my name, property ID, and said, "Trespassers are in my home. I have footage and documents." 20 minutes later, 2 cruisers showed up. Richard tried his charm first. "Officer, this is all a misunderstanding, family disagreement." But the cop cut him off. "Sir, are you aware this home is registered to Phoenix and Co. LLC under sole ownership of Miss Holt?" He blinked. "But, also," the officer continued, "we've reviewed your attempt to file ownership. That's considered fraud." "Ma'am," he turned to me, "do you want to press charges?" I looked Richard dead in the eyes. "Absolutely." They were escorted out, humiliated with nothing but the boxes they came with, but I wasn't finished. I handed the sheriff the second envelope I'd prepared. It contained a printout of the family chat, WhatsApp messages I'd secretly accessed using Grant's cloud backup from a forgotten laptop he once left logged in at my place. Their plan, in full detail. From the moment they found out I inherited the house, to exact dates and lies they planned to tell in court. One message from Richard read, "If we show up in person, she won't fight us. She's always been weak." Grant had written, "We gaslight her hard enough, she'll hand it over." Darlene's final message, "Let her cry, tears are cheaper than lawyers." 2 weeks later, they were served with civil suits. Forgery and fraud for the false property claim. Breaking and entering. Defamation, thanks to Richard's online posts trying to discredit my business with fake reviews. My lawyer, Nina Reyes, was a beast in heels. She launched a preemptive media statement and let every local outlet know what happened. Headline: Successful businesswoman wins court fight against family who tried to steal her home. It made the local papers. Then it hit Facebook. Then someone posted it to a Reddit thread about family scams gone wrong. It went viral. Within days, I had 3 new clients, a sponsored deal from a legal podcast, a feature interview request from Good Morning Springfield. But the best part? The IRS launched an investigation into Grant's firm after the publicity. Apparently, He'd been claiming fraudulent business losses for years. His company collapsed within a month. Richard lost his pension benefits when his fraud conviction was confirmed. Darlene, well, she moved into a studio apartment in Davenport. Alone. My revenge wasn't just about getting them out. It was about burning the bridge they lit on fire 5 years ago. I turned their lies into my leverage. But there was one more twist they never saw coming. They think the worst is over. They've been arrested, fined, and humiliated on cable morning shows. Their businesses collapse. Their friends vanish. But I want them dismantled in a way that feels final, not loud and vindictive, but methodical and undeniable. I want the truth to be a ledger they can't erase. The lawsuits move at the pace of other people's calendars, but I keep the pressure steady. Nina drafts motions like she's carving marble. She subpoenas records. She cross-checks bank transfers. She pulls 20 years of Grant's filings and shows, line by line, how his losses were creative bookkeeping to mask personal spending. Trips, charity events he never attended, wire transfers to shell companies whose only real purpose was to funnel cash for a lifestyle he couldn't afford. At the deposition, Grant sits under a fluorescent light that makes every small lie look larger. He sweats. He says he doesn't remember things with the kind of memory lapses people use when they think memory is a loophole. The court reporter types every evasive clause like a metronome. The judge thumps a gavel and starts asking pointed questions. That's when Grant's charm fails him. The gap between his story and the documents is a canyon. Meanwhile, Richard gets a call from the state bank regulators about unauthorized loans. His name is on the docket for a different kind of fraud than the one we built him for. The man who polished his cufflinks in executive suites now watches his pension evaporate in real time. He tries to call me. I let it ring. Darlene posts a long apology on a local forum. It reads like a script you write before you know the ending. Contrition with all the edges sanded off. People are not biting anymore. The community that once applauded their philanthropic photos, ribbon cuttings with Grant beaming beside Richard, turns their feeds into a courtroom. Comments become evidence of how public trust fractures when the people you love are not the people you thought you knew. I could stop there. I could step back and let the legal system do its work. But revenge, for me, is not only legal. It is cultural. It is public conscience. It's the sound of their names losing value, so I take one more step. I arrange a charity event, a small expo under my shop's branding, Phoenix & Co. I invite local business owners, a handful of journalists, the legal podcast that had reached out months ago, and a man I know at the county prosecutor's office. It's a community rebuilding event. Free website clinics, small business mentoring, pro bono legal consultations. I frame it as a tribute to Aunt Marla, a woman who believed in the overlooked. Grant shows up because he thinks he can sweep in to repair the relationship and get face time with the local business crowd. He arrives in a suit that once fit, trying to patch a reputation with a smile and a handshake. I ask for 5 minutes on stage. The room quiets. I tell the story, not the sanitized version, not the one that pleads for pity. I tell the facts. I pull up slides, timelines, bank statements, texts. I show the footage of them entering my house. I let the audio play where the backup chat calls them out, word for cold word. I watch people process the evidence. Faces go from polite interest to slow recognition to indignation. Grant tries to interrupt. The man from the prosecutor's office stands and hands a summons to one of his investors, right there. People murmur. The investors who used to volunteer at Grant's ribbon cuttings pass around their business cards, not for him, but to the pro bono legal team offering help for fraud victims. That's the subtle part of the revenge I plan. I don't simply take away what they had. I redirect the goodwill that once fed them. The money that had gone to their curated charity lunches now flows into community programs. The applause that once went to their public platitudes lands on people who actually deserve it. Grant's business loses not just clients, but the pipeline of introductions he relied on. One by one, the doors close. He watches as the networks that propped him up are rerouted. He had expected me to be the one who'd lose, and he never learned to build relationships that could survive scrutiny. There is a hearing. The judge is not theatrical, she's precise. She reads sections of Grant's ledgers aloud, then reads the law. Fraud. Conspiracy. The sentence is measured. restitution, community service, probation, but the court also issues an order that forces Grant and Richard to publicly correct the records they falsified and to pay for the forensic audit they triggered. It ruins them financially. It won't teach them conscience, but it removes the scaffolding that allowed their lies to look like success. Darlene files for bankruptcy. Richard, stripped of his pension and credibility, retires early into a small apartment that used to be someone else's guest room. They call, they text, they ask for mercy. They plead for a meeting in the same tones that once demanded things from me. I don't answer. Then comes the last, almost petty, thing that tastes like justice. Several months after the verdicts, I open a crate I'd kept sealed since Aunt Marla's funeral. Inside is a small wooden jewelry box, worn raw from years of hands, and a locket. The locket has a picture of Marla at 18, dancing in some blackened white photograph, hair cropped and eyes bright like sunlight through the shop window. She'd worn that locket in every picture I ever had with her. On the back of the locket is a tiny engraving, "For the one who blooms." When I snap it open, there's a small folded note tucked inside, brittle now, the ink faded. It's from Marla, written in long, looping letters. "If they ever come for you, remember this. Never make the mistake of saving your best secret for their approval. Plant it where it grows on its own." I place the locket around my neck. It sits heavy and warm, a compass I wear when I have to make difficult moves that nobody sees. I give the rest of Marla's savings, not the entire amount, but a chunk, to a nonprofit that helps women who were evicted get legal advice. I put my name on a tiny plaque in the lobby of a community center in Galena, because Marla would have laughed at the idea of a plaque. But I want there to be a visible marker, where people who think they are alone can notice a simple truth. Help exists. That is the ironic end of my revenge. I strip my family of the public laurels they abused, then use the energy of their downfall to build something others can use. People ask me if I feel lighter. It's complicated. Some days I wake with that old, cold feeling, the one that used to be near constant when I had nothing. It's a physical ache in my chest that sometimes wakes me before dawn. Other days the cottage smells of coffee and paint, my employees laugh in the garage office, and I read a message from a client whose website finally brings in steady customers. The ache loosens. It becomes a memory rather than a lodestone. I run Phoenix and Co. differently now. We take on clients most firms won't touch. Nonprofits, small shops on the edge, people whose ideas are good even if their bank accounts are not. We offer pro bono hours for eviction-era cases. We mentor designers from the community college down the road. I don't do this to feel holy. I do it because I want the world to operate on a different math. Kindness and competence over pedigree and performance. Sometimes, in the evenings, I sit on the back steps with a cup of tea and think of the night I stood on my parents' porch in the rain. I let myself remember how small I felt, how shockingly disposable. Then I look at the locket and the plaque and the little community center where someone is learning to code on a refurbished laptop donated by a client. Justice mattered. So did mercy, but mercy on my terms, when it felt like a gift I could choose to give, not a debt I owed. Grant moved to a different state after the settlements. He took a sales job with a company that sells used office furniture and learned how to live without the veneer of success. He called once, a year later, to say he had a child. He asked if I wanted to meet. I told him congratulations and nothing more. Some bridges are not rebuilt. Some doors have reasons to stay closed. Richard and Darlene never come around. I think they tried, in small ways, to patch their image, but the work required to be honest is harder than rehearsing apology lines. They settled into quiet lives that could not be compared to the one they thought they'd lost. There's a cruelty in that. They had chosen their course. As for me, I plant a row of peonies in Aunt Marla's garden every spring. They bloom with a stubborn pink that refuses to be ashamed of its color. People stop by sometimes and tell me the garden makes the whole street feel kinder. I tell them that's the point. At night, when the work is done and the shop's lights are off, I press my thumb against Marla's locket and remember what she said. A seed, not a corpse. I think about the way a life built quietly, without shortcuts and without entitlement, grows into something that survives storms. That's the last twist. They thought their cruelty would bury me. Instead, they gave me the soil I needed to plant a life they never could appreciate. They tried to steal a house. They ended up fueling a small city of people who now have websites, legal advice, and second chances. I am not vindictive for pleasure. I am deliberate because I refuse to be prey. And when the peonies open each spring, I walk the garden, touch the locket, and feel a kind of quiet I used to think I'd never earn. The rain still comes sometimes. Now when it does, it washes the world clean rather than drown me. I stand in it and feel like someone who has been through fire and come out with a few undeniable truths. That dignity shows up not as a headline, but as steady work. That family is what you make of it. And that the best revenge is building something the people who hurt you could never imagine taking away. I close the shop lights. The town goes quiet. I lock the door. I go to bed knowing I earned this life with my own two hands, and that's the most dramatic thing of all.